Hello, everyone, and welcome to Project Kin's Emma Explores. This is a monthly program we hold with a very special guest, Emma Cox. Emma joins us from Surrey in England, where she's a well-known professional genealogist and comes to us each month to share her insights on exploring her own family stories. With that, let me turn it over to Emma and have her tell us a little bit about what she's up to this month and tell us her story. Go ahead, please, Emma.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. Give me one moment. Just need to make it bigger. That's fine. And we'll start the presentation. So hello, everybody, and great to see you again this month for another Emma Explores. As Barbara mentioned, my name is Emma Cox. I live in the southeast of England. I'm family historian and genealogist. I've been doing this for quite a long time now, probably 30 odd years. And in the last 10 or so, I've been helping other people find out about their ancestors, put together trees and charts, help people with DNA, finding living relatives, and all sorts of other things like writing books and taking people on tours. I've also got a podcast called Journeys into Genealogy, where I've got over 110 episodes now there, and where I'm interviewing experts and people with interesting family stories. So I generally also intertwine some of my own family stories in that as well. So today we're going to be talking about finding and reading wills and what wills can tell you about your family. So to start off with the very basics, what is a will? So a will contains the wishes of the deceased, and it can be written many years before the death. I mean, sometimes people will last 10, 20 years, maybe even longer than that. So this is the wishes at the time the will was written, and actually sometimes might not necessarily be what they want to happen by the time they die. You never quite know in that instance. It can be very simple. So on the right-hand side of the screen here, I've just got one which shows you a simple one-page will of Florence May Cox, and she was of the Moorings in Warsash in Hampshire, and she was a widow, revoking all her former testamentary dispositions and leaving her son as the sole executor and will, and giving him everything. And that's literally all she wrote in her will, and it was witnessed. So you can't get a much simpler will than that, leaving everything to your son or daughter. However, it can be more than that. So in my own family here, that lady was married to one of my relations. This is one of my great-grandfathers. His name was Edward William Cox, and he was a very wealthy man. He was a publisher, a Victorian publisher based in London. He had lots of property, all sorts of different things, and a 16-page will. So this is just example what it looks like. And I found that in one of the archives, and you can see that it was weighted down so that I can take a photograph here. So the will was dated 1879, and he died, it was dated 23rd of May, he died the 24th of November, and it was proved the 11th of December. Generally, in times past, probate happened quite quickly. So people left a will and it was wound up, and then basically people carried on. So wills started off being handwritten, and then sometimes later on they were typed. And codicils, if you've ever come across the word codicil, that means an addition to a will. So somebody said at a certain point that this is what I want to happen. Something changes, somebody dies, someone's born, someone changes their mind about something. So they then say, right, I want to put a codicil, and I want to either change something or add something or take it away. So what's the difference between a will and probate? So they're both part of dealing with a person's estate. So someone will write a will. Once they die, then the estate goes into almost a state of limbo. And basically what has to happen is a court or somebody has to actually decide that, yes, this all looks right. And the person who's supposed to be the executor is an honest person. They're the right person to be doing that. And then they are granted probate. So they're then given legal permission to deal with somebody's estate. As I said, the will could be many years before the death, and it could have lots and lots of different codicils. Some people have one, some people might have 10. It really just does depend on what is happening with the will itself. So probate also tells you who the executors are. So somebody might have said in the will that they want 2 or 3 people to be their executors, and some of them might have died since the will was written, or they might have changed their mind. And it also tells you how much money was actually left and when the administration was granted. So on the side of the screen here, we've got another will for Florence May Cox, and this is dated 1975. And so she's leaving her son everything. So you can see down the bottom, it says the amount is £12,754 and the net value is 12,623. And so this is actually really good because on here, we know where she lived, we know the exact date she died, we know who the executor is, and we know the amount of money that she left. So we've got quite a lot of information just on this piece of probate here. And just to explain some of the terms used in a will. So somebody who writes a will is known as a testator, so if it's a man, a testatrix if it's a woman. A witness is somebody who attests that they know this person, that they are the person who is writing the will is the same person that is actually signing the will. So generally you have to have two witnesses. They can be somebody who's employed by the person. In this case, it's a gardener and the local solicitor. And you may also find, if you look through family wills, that the same firm of solicitors will go through various different people, and it can be different generations of solicitors dealing with different generations of the family. So the solicitor will deal with the father, and then the solicitor's son will deal with the son, etc., etc. And that can carry on for several generations. And when you're looking at wills, it can be an original or it can be a certified copy. So you can see I've highlighted on the screen at the bottom there, I certify that the foregoing is a correct copy of the original will. So this basically means that it can actually be used for legal purposes. If somebody dies and they don't have a will, they are known as intestate. And basically their estate can still be dealt with, but it's done slightly differently. So basically, they haven't left a will telling people what they want to happen. So somebody in that case will actually say, right, well, I'm going to deal with this. It can be that somebody is a relative, it can be a friend, it can be a solicitor, it can be anybody. And I have to say that recently there's been a bit of a scandal in England about probate. And some people have been trying to fraudulently claim estates, and they've actually managed it. There's been some sort of Eastern European gang who have been basically falsifying records and saying that they were friends of the person and that they were left the estate, and other people who are family, whatever, didn't get it. And so that happened several times, and there was a newspaper article about it recently. And so the probate office have temporarily changed what they're doing. I'm not exactly sure how they've changed it, but basically with administration, somebody is then given the permission to look after the estate, and it's up to them basically what they do with it. So in this case, this is Margaret Sophia Catley. So she's one of my great-grandmothers, and Oswald is my great-grandfather. She died in 1908 without a will, and he was the person who then administered her estate. It wasn't worth a great deal of money. It was only £50 in that case. And what happens with all of these is that you get this on what they call a probate calendar. So basically, the probate office in this country will list out each year, and as things happen, they put together a calendar, and it's done in name order. So you'll get somebody's surname, you'll get everybody with the same surname who died within a certain period of time on there, and then it's up to you to actually find it. And I'll go through how that process works and actually show you how it's done in a little while. And on the probate calendar, if you have somebody who doesn't have a will, it will say administration or with admin. And you can still ask for a probate, the copy of the will, as it were. You can ask for what information they have, and it's £1.50, and I'll explain in a little while a little bit more about that. So it's really good value to actually get wills because they can give you so much information. But when you go for one which has got administration only, you will only get a copy of the probate. You won't get a will. But it will still say, and you will still be expecting it, unless you have actually read this properly, because I've done it a couple of times and thinking, yes, I'll get a will, and then I haven't got a will, I've just got the probate. And if a will was taken out and was actually approved, so basically it changed. So before 1858, they were known as being proved, and then probate was granted after 1858. So the PCC, the Prerogative Court of Canterbury, basically they were the people. So it was a church court, and then it went into a civil system after that. So 1858's church, 1858 onwards is civil. And the National Archives has old wills there. And they've actually got a really good research guide. I'll just click on that and open that up so you can see it. So wills and administrations before 1858. And it tells you not everybody left a will and not all wills need to be proved. So people could leave instructions and things like that. And so you can see the National Archive holds wills. And by the late 1850s, it was proving about 40% of all wills. So there's loads and loads of information there, talks about all the different kinds of records. It even has some famous wills in there. And sometimes you can only view them in person. So this might mean that you need to actually visit Kew in London and actually look at the copies. If you ever get a chance to go to an archive like Kew, I highly recommend it because it's a really interesting experience. And there's nothing quite like touching original copies or old copies of documents. I mentioned famous wills. So one of the ones that is available is Jane Austen's will. So this just gives you an example of what a will used to look like. So in this case, it's fairly legible. It is helpful that there is actually spaces between the words there. Sometimes there isn't. And it tells you that it's Jane Austen. It tells you who the beneficiary is, which is generally family. Sometimes people left money to their servants or friends and family. Sometimes wanting people to have something and that they buy something in remembrance of the person. That's quite common. The date of the will, where it's proven, the executor and things like that. So on the National Archives, there's various different famous wills. And then you can search for various people within here. And if you don't have an account on the National Archives, it's highly worthwhile doing that. It's totally free, and you can actually get some things downloading for free as well. So for example, you can see you've got Shakespeare, Admiral Lord Nelson and Jane Austen are three of the people that they actually pick out as part of their famous wills there. I mentioned the National Probate Calendar. So what I've done with this is I wanted to show you how things have changed over the years. So the earliest one on here is 1879. So this is the one that I showed you earlier on. This is my great-grandfather. He died and he left an estate worth around about £200,000. So it tells me on here, late of Moat Mount, so I know where he lived. And he also had a house in Russell Square. His profession was sergeant at law. It tells me the date he died. It tells me where he died. It also says that who the executors are. So his eldest son was Irwin, and his younger son was Harding. And Henry Bennett Edwards was his son-in-law. And it tells me their professions as well. So you get a lot of information actually on the probate calendar entry when you look back at the older ones. If you move across to the 1904 one, we have Eliza Reeves as the second entry on there. So basically she was a spinster. She still managed to leave a will, and she left it to one of her nieces. Her name was Fanny Hurt Symes, wife of Sir Robert Henry Symes, and she left £500 there. Then we move on to 1937. We have Ada Rosalind Edwards, who is the daughter of Edward above and married to Henry. And it says that she left her will to the executors were Ernest and her son-in-law, Albert John Evans, who was an actor. And then we move over to the right-hand side. We have George Hewitt. And it basically says where he died, and he was on war service and he had administration only, so he didn't leave a will. And the person he was left to was a rabbit trapper. This is where you get some intriguing insights into people's professions. And I have to say, it's actually really quite sad, because after a period of time, and I can't remember exactly when it was, maybe the 1950s onwards, they gave you much less information. So on the final one here from 1979, you can see you've got somebody like Gertrude Florence Cox. You've got her address, you know when she died and that probate was granted. It doesn't give you all the lovely information about the executors and the professions and things like that that you had previously, which I think is a bit of a pity. But I think it's to do with the amount of space and information that they were sharing. So just as an example there, that looks really good in terms of the different things. And if you want to search the probate calendar, you can literally just click on here and it will take you straight in, and you put someone's name in here. So if I put in Edward William Cox, and it's coming up with him from my tree there, and I go search, And if I view the record, and then I can see the whole page here, and I want to click on it to make it visible better, you can see the type of information that you get there. And one of the things you do have to be careful of is when you're reading these things through, and if you actually want to get copies of everything, it's quite easy to confuse the date of probate and the date of death when you're requesting something. Pardon me. So if you want to get a copy of something, it's worthwhile double checking when you're actually going to request something. I'll show you how it's done in a moment, that you actually get the dates right, because I've done it once or twice, or I've read something slightly wrong, or I've read it from somebody who's got the same name. So because you get people who've got the same name next door to each other, you just need to be really careful that it's actually your person that you're requesting. So on Ancestry, you can also search for wills and probate. So this is just an example of the screenshot of the type of thing that you get. And this is what it looks like here again. So you can put in people's names, you can filter by different categories in terms of different locations and things like that. And you can see sample images. So you've got Charles Darwin, Charles Dickens, and people like that within it. Also on Ancestry, you've got things like the court, land, wills and financial and extracted probate records. I won't go into those now, but you're welcome to click on those links and actually see where they take you. Find My Past also has some wills and probates on there. Their search is slightly different. So basically you put the details in here. I'm not logged in here, I'd need to do that, but then you can actually see what records come up there. They don't have as many as Ancestry do. So this is actually what I've spent a lot of time on the probate website recently, and I really like it. So for £1.50, you can get a copy of one of your ancestors' wills. You don't even have to be related to them. I do it for people who are distant cousins, where I'm trying to work out, have I got the right person in the tree? And just to see, okay, well, what information are they giving me? So when you start off, you put in the names, the year of death, and it asks you were they a soldier. And then you go on and you do a second page, and it asks you for any keywords. So if it's a particular place, you'd put that in, month of death, date of death, and then the year of their probate. And so you carry on. So those are the screenshots, and this is what it actually looks like. So on here, you've got these different things here. And I'm just going to nip back because I'm already logged in here. And I'm going to show you once you've actually got something. So these are some of the wills I've got recently. So you can see download grant, download will, all of those. These are ones I've ordered within the last week or so, and it is quite quick mostly. Sometimes if they're a more modern will, you can actually get it. So this Oscar Wilkinson Cox one, he died very recently. So I literally pressed the button and it was there instantly because it had already been digitized. Some take slightly longer than that, and some take quite a long time indeed. So once you get these, let's just choose somebody who's interesting. So let's choose Ada's. If we check download will, and then in her instance here, we can see the whole of her will, and it goes through. And hers is actually relatively simple. It's just 2 pages there. And I'm going to show you her in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then you can see the probate. So it was granted to Ernest Edwards and to Albert John Evans, and you can see the details of the amount there. So you get a lot of information in here for £1.50. So this particular will is quite an interesting one, and I'll tell you why in a little while. When you get your will, what are you going to do with it? Sometimes if it's a typewritten one, it's fairly straightforward. You can read it without any problems. Other times it's not necessarily, or sometimes you might want a digital copy of something. So what I do is I've got some software called Transcript, and it's free from this guy called Jacob Baroma, and you can download it. And basically what happens is that you get two windows. So in the top window, you can put a picture of a will, and in the bottom window, you can type in it. I'll just start it up. Hang on a moment. I'm just going to minimize my screen for a minute and just go into it. So this is what it looks like. So I've still got his will sitting there, so I can type anything. So this is the last will and testament of, and then when you start going through it, it scrolls for you, so it moves down the screen. And so it's up to you how you want to actually display things. I'll give you examples of some of the things I've done in a little while, but this is free to use, and it's really, really useful for transcribing stuff. So basically, it takes an image at a time. So basically, you will need to have your will, rather than a PDF, you'll need to have it as something like a JPEG file, an image file. And basically, when you've finished with your first one, you just do File, and then you can open an image file, and you can go to page 2. And then you can carry on with page 2. And it saves it all as a raw text file. So you can use that in Word or anything you want to. So I really, really recommend this, and it's free. I actually signed up today, and I haven't got the thing through for the professional version, which cost me $19. And because within that, there are a couple of extra bits and pieces which I haven't used to date, but I wanted to try it out and just see what it's like. Right, hang on a mo. Let's go back to the presentation, and hopefully, where was I? I'm going to start it up again. I was there. So probate search, that's how you do it. Transcript. So you have a few options. If it's a handwritten will, you can learn to read the old handwriting yourself. And if you're going to do that, the National Archives has several really good courses that you can actually do. Let's have a look at the first one. If you want to learn to read medieval Latin, that's fine. That's a little bit beyond me, to be quite honest. Paleography is the one here. And then basically you can go through and actually run this. This is from an old version of the National Archives website that they haven't bothered updating. So just, it's slightly old-fashioned looking, but it does still work. So you can actually sign up for doing that one. That's the first one. And that's the link to the second one there. The Society of Genealogists also has a course here. So you can see some of these are not too difficult to read, I would say, with those ones. And also with secretary hand, which is a type of handwriting, which is more difficult to read because the forms of the letters are actually different. So you have S's and E's look quite similar in some of these. Family Tree magazine did a really good article a while ago. So I've actually taken the bits and pieces here, and that's the link to the article there. There's a book called Reading Old Handwriting by a lady called Eve McLaughlin, on the National Archive. And so that Eve's book will give you examples, different ways that people form the letter E, for example, so you can see what those look like when you're actually identifying different words. And then, yes, with it, some things are difficult where people sort of overwrite. So the letter might come down the bottom of a G, and that might go into the next line, and you're not quite sure if that's part of the first line or the second line. And the context. So you're very welcome to look at all of this, and you'll get the slides afterwards. If you ask, Barbara will circulate those. So don't worry about actually trying to take all of this down at the moment. And make just a general comment there, people weren't consistent. So the ways they formed their letters, the ways that words were spelt, the ways that names were spelt, if they used particular acronyms or shortened versions of things. So sometimes it's easier to find things, and sometimes it isn't. And occupations and words and things like that. It's sometimes really useful to get to dictionaries of old occupations. You can find those online if the word's unfamiliar and you're not sure what it means when the person said that that was their profession. So if you're actually in an archive trying to do this, highly recommend that you take photographs. You can try and transcribe things when you're there, but it's much better to try and do things when you're at home. And so you could use the transcription software that I showed you earlier on, and then actually work through it. Now, AI is supposed to be the big thing everywhere, and that it's doing wonderful things for genealogy, and that there's all sorts of things going on. So I thought, I'll try it and see how I get on. And this is the same will that I started showing you earlier on. And this is their attempt at doing it. And I wasn't impressed, to be quite frank. It's not that difficult to read in terms of handwriting. It is quite consistent in the way it's actually written and everything. And the first lines start off not too bad. So it gets up to sort of line 7, I think it is, and then give to my wife. And then it's immediate necessities, use, benefit, and disposal. And then it just goes completely and utterly rubbish. Utterly rubbish. You can see the words don't exist. It's created all sorts of stuff on there. So I did it. I gave it all the pages, and I looked at that and I thought, it's actually going to be quicker rather than me trying to go through that and correct it, to actually do it all manually myself. So I did. So this is what it should have been. So we've got the last will and testament of John Samuel Upcott. He's a gentleman, former wool and serge manufacturer and ex-wool merchant, appointing his wife, his 2 sons, his 3 sons in this case, as executors and trustees. So he's giving his wife £200. So when I'm doing this, I basically put in punctuation, because you'll find in a lot of instances, sentences literally run into each other. So you have to read something, sometimes several times, to work out where the sentence stops and where the next one starts. And I put in things in bold where it refers to places, to names, people, occupations, that sort of thing. And I also put things like dates and money in modern parlance, as it were. So rather than saying £200 of current money, it's £200, because it takes a lot less space and it stands out more easily when I'm trying to read things. So I'm giving my wife £200 to be paid within 14 days for her own use, benefit, and disposal, wearing apparel, household goods, furniture, implements, utensils of household plate, plated goods, jewels, jewellery, linen, china, glass, books, pictures, ornaments, prints, live and dead stock, wine, spirituous and other liquors, and consumable stores and garden and other utensils, as shall be in or belong to my dwelling house and other premises. And you can see it goes on. So it tells you what he thought was important, the sort of things he had as part of his estate. So when you're doing transcriptions, it gets easier over time. When I first started, I found it difficult. I couldn't read things, and it takes a while to get your eye in. But one of the things that we as family historians have as an advantage over other people trying to read our wills is we know the people. We know the names, we know the places, we know the relationships. So we can use all that information, and then we can see, okay, well, that's that word there. That looks very similar. Those are those letters. And you can use that to actually help you read the rest of the will. Will formats. So most will follow a standard format. So you start with the person's details, then they say who the executors are, and then they start to tell you what they're leaving and to whom. And some of them go on and on and on and on for several pages of basically the same information with slightly different wording. For one son gets this, and it talks about, and then the next son gets this, and you get a half a page of the same information just repeated for each one. And you might get codicils. Remember, codicils, I said earlier on, were changes. So that's where somebody's, maybe a beneficiary has died, or the executor's died, or they've bought something else, or they've sold something else, and they basically want to include it within the will. So going to William Upcott, for anybody who was here at my last talk about our serge manufacturers, he's my 4 times great uncle. He was born in Columpton in 1776, and he died in 1851, and he left his estate to his 3 children. So William, who only lasted a few years after him, Elizabeth, and then John Samuel was the person we saw earlier on. I thought it would be interesting to see who inherited what. So I basically used something called, oh, I'll remember the name in a moment, of to create this, but you could do it in anything, with the different people and who inherited what from whom. So I made William Upcott blue. So anybody who got stuff from him got the blue. Elizabeth was sort of pinky purple. So anybody who got stuff from her was pinky purple, and green was John Samuel. So William basically split his money between the three children. So the two sons got the estates and the businesses and things like that. Elizabeth did get quite a chunk of money, and she got £6,000 and the property that he was living in. She never married. So basically, she then gave her estate to her nieces and nephews on either side. So on William's side, her brother William had two children, and she gave each of them £100. On the other side, you've got her brothers John Samuel. She basically gave their children a lot more money. So she gave Charles, the first one, he got £100 before he died. And then the girls, Fanny got 1,000, Alice got 1,000, Arthur and Ernest got 300, and then Lewis got 100. No idea why she divided it up like that, but she was very plain and simple in her will that that's how she wanted it done. So I'll go into William's will in a moment. Hang on with that as a thought. We've got Elizabeth, that's done. John Samuel, so he basically, his widow gets the house, and then his first son, Charles, John, predeceased him. So he died in 1898, and John Samuel himself died in 1908. Charles had actually got £500 from his grandfather, William. And then his father, John Samuel, mentioned his widow. So John's widow gets investment income. So this is where they basically didn't give people money outright. They were quite sensible about how they did things. They basically thought that people needed money to live on long term, rather than giving people money and it all being spent or wasted, that it would actually be invested so that they then had a longer term continual income. So she got investment income from £1,600. And then that was continued with John Samuel's children. He then gave his daughter Fanny investment income from 1,600. Alice got slightly less, from 1,500. And then there were actual bequests for Arthur, Lewis and Ernest there. So I thought it was quite interesting just to see how the money flows around within that small family there, really. William Upcott, the brother. This is his will. Anyone want to have a go at doing that one? So this is the will of me, William Upcott of Clumpton in the county of Devon, woolen manufacturer, and I think that says merchant. And then after that, it's the sort of thing that I need to sit and look at for a long time. It's not an easy will to transcribe because the words are so similar in a lot of instances that trying to actually do it, it's not something where you can skim it and get the sense of it. You have to read every single word in that. It's not particularly long. I think it's got a couple of pages after this, but it's something that I will have to sit down, and it'll probably take me longer to do than his brother's will, which was longer in actual size and length. So that's one for the future. And then his brother, John Samuel, I wanted to see what had happened to business and properties and things. And I couldn't find much out about the woolen business after his death. And thinking about how things had actually changed in the early 1900s, and basically people weren't wearing as much wool as they used to, and things were fashions. I'm not sure exactly what happened to it. I need to investigate that a bit further. I did find that, funnily enough, and I don't know why, that several of his children became schoolmasters. So one was the assistant master of Marlborough College, another was principal of Christ Church Hospital in Horsham. His son was then a schoolmaster at Eton, and then the other one was schoolmaster at Wellington. So for some reason, they all went into education. It's not necessarily what you would have thought if you've come from a wool making family. So it's like almost a complete twist off to a side there. Now we're going to another part of the family. This is Oswald James Catley, who's my 2 times great-grandfather. His will in April 1922. So he declares this to be his last will and testament, and he desires his funeral should be conducted on absolutely the cheapest possible scale, and that none of the members of my family shall at any time wear mourning for me, and it is my particular desire that my wishes in this respect be actually carried out. I desire to record that the entire value of my estate being unfortunately so small, I can leave nothing usefully to my dear son Bernard Law Catley, and I can only commend him to God's mercy. So other people got some money. Unfortunately, Bernard, he was actually the eldest child. He didn't get any money from this will, and he only lived about another 4 or 5 years after his father anyhow. And I don't think he had any children, and I don't think he was married. So I thought it was quite fun just to pick out that as an idea of what somebody actually mentions in a will. And then we have a will here of Rosalinda Alicia Cox, and I've actually got a copy of that next to my computer at the moment. She was the wife of Edward William Cox, the wealthy man I mentioned earlier on. So her will was dated the 12th of December, 1883. You can see she had 4 codicils. So she changed her mind and added a load of different things afterwards. And basically the executors were her her cousin, Horace, her first cousin, Horace. And it's about 4.5 type pages of the will itself. And then the rest of the will, which is about the same length, is 4 codicils. And she leaves various bequests, including books, furniture, and jewelry. So the books in her sitting room to go to one of her sons of her daughter and her son, Harding, once they reach the age of 21. And then she says about her oak table chiffonier and carved chairs in her boudoir, her bedroom. I think the terminology used in some of these things is lovely. And then at the end of the will, so she's done a codicil here saying revoking the bequest of books and giving the said books equally between particular grandsons, William and Stanley Edwards. And then she was also saying about all her jewelry. And I put this because it's like there's tons of it. So a pearl set consisting of a necklace, earrings, 2 brooches, and 1 snake bracelet, a diamond bracelet and a diamond pendant brooch, a butterfly diamond brooch, a miniature bracelet with a portrait of Mr. Sergeant Cox, her husband, my sapphire and diamond ring, my diamond ring, my gold bracelet studded with diamonds, and my watch. So it was rather fun actually seeing all of those. And I've no idea what happened to all of those. They certainly didn't make it down to my generation. They must have probably been sold, I would have thought, by now. And what was also interesting about this was that I'm descended from her. I'm also descended from her brother. So she married and she had children at roughly 25-year intervals. Her brother didn't. Her brother had his first child in his 40s, and his name was Robert. And John William Martin was a barrister in London, and by all accounts, he didn't make a great deal of money by doing that. So she'd married a very wealthy man, so she basically gave them money to support them in later life. So she talks about their leading a legacy of £1,000, £500, £55 there. And I thought it was rather interesting. It's like purchasing an annuity in the names either from the commissioners for the reduction of the national debt or from any public company. So she's very specific about what she wanted things actually invested in. And then she did a codicil here, and then she said she's leaving him another £2,000 and then £1,000 there. And then there's another one. She's giving them a bequest of £100 and another £850. So you can see she doled out quite a lot of money to them over time there. And the thing about this is I'm descended from John William Martin's second marriage. He married aged 66. His wife was a lot younger than him. She was in her 20s, and they had my great-grandfather literally the year after this will was written. So he's not mentioned anywhere at all. So basically his father and his elder half-brother are being looked after, but nothing for them onwards. And when John William Martin died, he didn't hardly left any money. So then we've got Ada's will. So Ada is the daughter of Rosa and Edward William Cox. And we saw the beginning of her will there. So she's appointing Ernest Edwards, and she's giving him £15,500. She's giving her daughter-in-law, Inez Clare Edwards, £100. She's giving her former daughter-in-law, who is remarried, £100. And she's giving her brother £100. Because even though Edward William Cox was very wealthy, he left his estate divided between his 3 children, and Harding being the younger one. Harding was a bit of a spendthrift, and he basically went through all his money. He got made bankrupt and all sorts of things. And he wasted a lot of money, because I found bankruptcy notices saying 75,000, 50,000 pounds. And we're talking about 100 years ago. That was an awful lot of money in those days. So he's done that. She's done that, rather. Those bequests there, legacies to servants, pardon me, excuse me. And then finally, she's saying that she wants to divide the rest of it between her son, Ernest, and her daughter, Constance. You might think that's all fine. So that's the rest of her will. However, there are people missing. So at the top there, we've got Emily, who was married to Harold. She got £100 from the left. Inez got £100. Albert was the executor. Constance was the one who inherited. We've got the £100 to her brother Harding, and we got the 15,500 to Ernest. My great-grandmother is Naomi. She is the one next to Ernest there, and her sister Vivian. Neither of those two are mentioned. And I'm sort of not 100% sure why. I think that Vivian married a fairly wealthy man. Naomi did get money to buy a property and did things with that there, but they're literally not mentioned in the will. And I found this really quite strange when I was looking at it. I only got this will quite recently, and just thinking, well, why would you not mention them in some way when you've actually specifically said about other people? Some of them predeceased her, so you can understand why they wouldn't necessarily be there, and she looked after their spouses. But the living ones, you'd think that she would have done some token of something, or if she's talking about leaving rings to people or anything like that. I don't know, but there was no mention of them. However, I did a little bit more digging. And then Hilary was the son of the Ernest, who was the youngest one on the far right-hand side there. He died in 1971, and he was a hairdresser, a coiffeur, and he had a business in Hove near Brighton. I don't think he had children, but the way he said it was that if there were children, whether he expected somebody to pop up out the woodwork, don't know. But basically he said that if his wife, Annalise, didn't survive him for a month, then he would leave his estate to Bennett Percy Cox and Frieda Davis and Ada Constance Evans, who were the children of the people who weren't really mentioned. Certainly the first two were, because that's my grandfather, Bennett Percy Cox. However, she lived for another 20 odd years, and she didn't. She left it to her nephews, and she was German, so that whatever money there was there, and an unknown couple, Marjorie and Derek Reeves, whether they were something to do, they were friends or something like that. So the final person I'm going to include, I found this today, and I thought I'd just pop it in there as something a little bit thought-provoking, put it like that. She died in 1956, the wife of Herbert William Spiller, and she's directing her executors to take all necessary steps, and for this purpose to employ and pay such doctors or other skilled persons as they, in their sole discretion, may think proper, for the purpose of ascertaining that I am in fact dead, and not in any state having only semblance of death, in order as so far as possible to avoid all risk of my being buried alive. Not come across that in a will before. So I imagine that is quite a lot of people's, they obviously wouldn't want that to happen to them. So I've got some recommended reading here. So there's a guide called The Wills of Our Ancestors by Stuart Raymond. That's a fairly small book, so some of these are under £10 if you want to get copies of them. It's also available on the Kindle. Probate Jurisdictions, Where to Look for Wills. Again, that's one by Stuart Raymond. Examples of Handwriting. The Wills Before 1858, Eve McLaughlin. Reading Old Handwriting. That book is actually not terribly easy to get hold of. You might find one in one of the local family history societies over here, and they will send them out to anywhere. Wills and Other Probate Records by Karen Granham. words from wills and other probate records. That can be really useful because if you see a load of words that don't exist anymore, occupations and things like that. What helped me with my own research? So I use the General Register Office a lot for finding births, marriages and deaths. So it's about £3 to a copy of information there for an online version for births and deaths. They don't cover all periods, but they cover quite a lot of it. And that can be quite helpful in ascertaining you've got the right person. The probate service that I showed earlier on for copies of wills. The National Archives, I mentioned that's free as well for any wills pre-1858. Ancestry's probate calendar, highly worth looking at. The transcript software, definitely get a copy of that. And Pharos tutors do a course called Wills and Administrations, the Riches of Probate Records. I did that 2-3 years ago, and that is very good because they give you the explanation about all the different courts if you want to find out older wills and things like that, where you're likely to actually find all the information. That's it. So any questions?
So many questions. So many questions. You can, yeah. For starters, the what was her name? The Phyllis, who has her will that says, "Go make sure that I really am dead." Wouldn't the reading of the will be done sometime after, usually even the funeral? What's up with that?
Obviously, she's making extra sure.
I know attorneys have, very specific professional requirements. So what's an attorney to do? Go dig her up?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The other question I had is you've enlisted a lot of references for sources out of Ancestry UK. I know we have a number of very skilled genealogists on here right now. Insights about Canada and the United States in particular?
I believe that things aren't so centralized, that it's more state-based. So you'd have to get in
maybe
touch
county.
with yeah.
Yeah.
The local archives, that sort of thing, and see what information is actually available there. I've not really done a great deal of research on American wills, so I'm definitely not an expert. So if anyone else wants to contribute here.
David, I see you reaching for the mute button. Go ahead.
In a prior life, I was financial planner and worked with estate work. So I've got a yellow pad full of questions here.
All right.
And primarily, Emma, explain some of the basic differences between the US and UK rules. For example, here in the US, if you witness a will, you cannot inherit. So that implies
that's the same here. Yeah, that's the same here.
The same there. Okay. And for the love of God, please explain peppercorn rent.
Peppercorn rent is nothing to do with wills, really. That's just somebody. It's basically to do with property. But a peppercorn rent is it literally used to be a peppercorn because pepper used to have a value many years ago when it was rare. But it's a small sum that somebody has to pay just to basically say that they are the owner of something. I don't know what instances is actually applicable in. It would depend on what you're actually buying, and it's not really used nowadays. We have something called ground rent nowadays, which is generally a fairly small sum which you use on the maintenance of the building, that sort of thing. But peppercorn rent would go to the owners, and it's up to them what to do with it, and it would be a very big sum of money.
So I found that in reference to a UK will from about 1800. And I got the feeling they were trying to convey property to a family member without public disclosure of the amount actually that the property sold for. So it's like, so we rent this for a peppercorn for 1 year, and then there's no other there's no other information concerning that transaction. So it's almost like, here's a way we're going to sell it, but nobody gets to know what it sold for.
Yes, something like that. Yes. It's not common nowadays. Certainly people don't do it now.
No, not at all.
No.
Oh.
No, now everything is that you have to prove things via a court and things. And that thing where I mentioned about people doing fraudulent probates, I'd not come across that until quite recently. That was a month or two ago, where there was an article saying that basically people were fraudulently creating wills, saying that this person was an executor and they were due to inherit. They basically were looking, because there is something called heir hunting. Have you heard of heir hunting? Where you basically look for people where people don't have any known heirs, and people were looking for those estates, and they were basically trying to take them over. And other ones where there weren't very close relatives, for example.
We actually have that here in the United States, where when you announce something is going through probate, that becomes a public record. So those who are watching such records know about who you are and how to reach you. And then you start getting mail immediately saying, oh, you don't know me, but. And so, yeah, having recently been the executor of a will that went through probate, yeah, you get a lot of that.
And probate at the moment is taking an awfully long time. It can take 6 months easily, much longer than it ever used to.
Yeah, that was the case here. It was nearly a year.
Government aren't coping. Yep.
Oh.
Say someone
David,
dies
you
in
had more questions.
New York State, their probate may never end. The courts will appoint an attorney to be the administrator, and the longer he drags it out, the more money he makes. Yeah.
You do have some wills and estates where there's a very famous case called Jarndyce and Jarndyce, done by Charles Dickens, where various people inherit, and it goes to the eldest son of the eldest son, and then it goes to the eldest son, next son, and it goes down different generations, and some things can go on for decades, trying to fix things and work out who the actual living heir is.
Sorry, David, I think I interrupted you. I suspect you had other questions as well.
Yeah, just a couple of things. So, Emma, what's your experience using AI to analyze probate documents? Is there a particular LLM that's more effective than others, or do you have a favorite?
I haven't really used it at all, to be quite honest. I'm very new to using AI. I've tried a little bit of ChatGPT here and there, but I haven't really done anything. Ask Denise Allen. She's the best person to talk to about AI and looking at documents, because I actually noticed that she posted something saying she'd got something like a 340-page estate document or something in 2022, and she'd basically parked it thinking, I can't do anything with that, and she asked AI to do something with it. So if you have a look for her, one of her latest posts, that's about that, and I'm sure she'll say which system she actually used to interrogate it.
Okay, thank you. And are in UK wills, is it the same as in the United States, where if you want to disinherit a child, you leave them $1 or some token amount? Not that I'm going to disinherit any children, that's not where this is going, but I've run across this before.
I think more sometimes people are left out of wills completely. I came across another will where it said, and if any of my wife's family does so and so, or if anybody challenges the will, this happens. So you get an idea about family disputes and things like that, but there's nothing about leaving somebody a token sum. I don't think people would understand that, really. Certainly not looking back on it. You'd have to know the dynamics of the family at the time to know that that's what somebody meant.
I think the legal reasoning is, if you mention them and leave them a specific amount of money, they can't use that as a legal angle to say they were accidentally omitted from the will.
possible. I don't think people tend to challenge wills very much in this country. You do occasionally get it, but you don't hear about it. It's only if it's quite dramatic, if somebody's a dispute's been going on for a long time or something like that, or that there isn't it's not common, put it like that.
Thank you.
I wish I could say it were uncommon here in the US. From what I understand, it is very much the key dynamic for attorneys in the field, because that, and things like leaving $1 is, I didn't make a mistake, I really don't want you, kind of thing. It's welcome to a very litigious world.
Yeah.
Canada, any additions here? You know who you are.
I'm actually not that familiar with, I haven't researched too much other than personal experience, but ending up having to go through the process of firing an executor who didn't do their job. So that was fun. But, and I get kind of the opposite. As the executor was not doing his job, the calls were consistent from the attorney handling it, to myself as a beneficiary saying, get this guy to do something because there's a lot of money here. So it was sort of the opposite. Like, I'd like to close this file, so get on it here. So, but I believe ours are. I think I checked the other day when we were talking. I think it is indeed handled on a provincial basis, which provinces are like our states or like counties, I guess. So it's not a national program for wills.
Actually, and the other thing that I should mention is ours are England and Wales only, and Scottish wills are different. And I started to try and look for some Scottish wills for my, I can't remember who it was, somebody who died in the 1920s and somebody who died in the 1950s. And I don't, that none of those are available online, the more recent ones. You'd actually have to go to, I think it's the National Records of Scotland in Edinburgh, if I remember rightly, could be wrong, and look. You have to request and look that way. You can get more modern wills, but Scottish wills aren't generally available.
Wow. Yeah, I think in the US it's on a county basis. Yeah, well, wow. Thank you so much, Emma. That was fascinating. I think you have in this community some people very excited on the topic of death, to put it simply. It is fascinating, and you have introduced us to the finer points. I look forward to getting these recordings out so that we can keep referencing them. Do you have ideas about topics you plan to cover in the coming month?
I did have one. Give me one moment because I wrote it down. I will just find it again. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to do this.
While she's looking that up, and to distract you, let me remind you that Emma and I have now worked out a new schedule for these Substack Live preview events on the Friday before her Thursday program. Emma and I are still working out the timing on that, but I'm thinking that will be at the 10 a.m. slot, Pacific time, or 6 p.m. slot for you on the Friday before, starting in October. Does that sound right, Emma?
Something like that. I can't remember
something like
exactly.
That. Well, stay tuned. Stay tuned on that one. But thanks again for those of you who joined us last week. Go ahead. You got something?
I have. There's a particular family line called Mosley, Mosley, and there are all sorts of things connected with that one. There's links to Wedgwood, which is a very famous pottery company in this country, links to Charles Darwin, lots of reverends, so lots of clergy, links to royalty. So there's all sorts of stuff within that. So I'm going to put that together. I'm not sure if that's going to be the next one, but that's definitely going to be coming up at some point in the rest of the year.
Isn't that a fun way to go through your family tree? Let's see. What do I have in here that's fun?
Well, I'm starting to note things down when I come across them and thinking, oh, that will make a good topic. And then I'll add bits and pieces to it. So, yeah.
Now, if any of you aren't already subscribers to Emma's Journeys into Genealogy podcast, just go take care of that. get yourself subscribed. It's really quite a delightful podcast. Every time I turn around and tune back in, I'm always astonished at the kinds of people that she has interviewed and their amazing stories. And of course, you can get to that here in Substack by subscribing to it in Substack, and make sure that her newsletter is updating you on what the latest podcast comes in is always available. Just a little nudge there for you, Emma. So with that, a special thank you to all of you for joining us today, and all of you out there on Video Land. Look forward to talking to you again next week, and we'll dive into something fun that will take us into explore the old family stories with an expert. Thank you again. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Barbara.